You're tuning in to the O&P Check-In, an SPS podcast. I'm Brendan Erickson, a regional sales manager at SPS.
And my name is Jackie Green, a marketing specialist at SPS. This show brings you the latest happenings in the O&P industry. We're unpacking trends and news from this tight-knit orthotics and prosthetics community.
Thank you for joining us. Let's get started. All right, everyone. Jackie is on the road this week, and so to fill in, we have Clinical Education Manager Sam Brulette, and who I like to call the SPS Rockstar. Thanks for joining us, Sam.
Hey, it's great being on, and I'm not Jackie, so.
Hey, well, we'll try and fill her shoes. It's tough to do. And speaking of that, how about I throw you a curveball and ask you to do the sponsored ad?
Okay, let's do it. Beat the heat with Knit Right's lightweight torso interface. Seamless protective body sock. It provides more cushioning, moisture wicking, and antimicrobial properties to keep skin dry, protected, and comfortable, and can be used with all types of spinal orthosis and body jackets. Higher stretch fabric means fewer SKUs fit more patients. Explore Knit Right's torso interfaces on spsco.com.
Have you heard of SPS Unpacked? In these short, fun videos, we unbox the latest product offering and explore its unique features.
In the latest episode, we took a look at the Willowwood Meta Core foot. Follow the link in our show notes to learn why this PDAC verified foot is a great option for K3 and K4 users.
Hello, everyone. I'm extremely excited today for two reasons. First, kind of bittersweet here. Jackie is on the road, but I have my good friend and SPS Rockstar Clinical Manager Sam Brulette joining us as a special co-host this week. But really what I'm excited about, and I apologize, Sam, nothing against you, but our two guests from COAPT, Blair Locke and Shawn Robinson. Co-founded by Blair in 2013, COAPT is the world's first pattern recognition systems for upper limb prosthetics and myoelectric control. Today, Blair serves as CEO and Shawn Robinson serves as COAPT's East Coast Regional Manager. All right, guys, welcome Blair, welcome Shawn.
Hey, glad to be here. Thanks for having us.
Great to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're going to kick it off. And of course, thank you guys for joining us. Can you guys just share a little bit about yourselves and how you became in O&P?
Yeah, I'll start. So this is Shawn, for those listening. Gosh, how candid can I be with the CEO on the call?
As candid as you can. Come on.
Yeah. So my journey into O&P is, it's not something that I sought out, or I don't think that I knew anyone in my personal life who was an amputee or born with a limb difference necessarily who used a prosthetic. Really, my journey starts in 2012. I was in school here in the kind of southeast part of Massachusetts, I was getting a bachelor's degree in general business administration, and actually a neighbor of mine worked for Myoelectric hand manufacturer Touch Bionics, and she called me up and asked if I wanted to frankly move boxes for beer money. And at the time I said, that sounds just about right. And so they were moving into their Mansfield, Massachusetts location at the time, and I helped them move in, and they had a need in customer support, and I had enough time in between classes to help take calls for them. So I started doing that. I never imagined that I would be there for 7 years, eventually joining their business development and reimbursement team. My tenure there was coming to an end. They were making some changes, and I was contacted by my now boss at COAPT, Erica Carlson, our director of sales, and she said, hey, is this something you'd be interested in? I didn't have any sales experience. I'm not a clinician or a therapist or an engineer or anything. And I said, just the product's amazing, and this is something I want to be a part of. And so I've been with COAPT for the last 4 years on the East Coast.
Awesome. I love that beer played a good part in this. I love it.
Always, yes.
Well, this is Blair. I'll say that beer money plays a large part in any small or growing business, so that's a good connection. Similar to Shawn, didn't have the strongest ties to the field before I really got into it. Back at around 2003, I would say I began what you would call a research career in O&P. I was an engineer, am an engineer by schooling, and got involved with some engineering graduate work. Happened to be a project in the area. I'll joke and say that I got kind of talked into that project and really found something I liked. I moved to the Chicago area in 2005 and was lucky enough to become one of the earliest team members of the group here in Chicago who developed and really rolled out what's known as targeted muscle reinnervation, or TMR surgical technique. And through my time, I was with that group for about 9 or 10 years and was fortunate enough to get my hands dirty in almost every aspect of upper extremity world. Turned to co-found COAPT in 2012, really started selling product in 2013, and have been focused on growing that business, delivering our technology to the field ever since. We were a seed of a company. Now we're quite an operation, frankly, selling product in the most corners of the world. We've got a very diverse team, great folks like Shawn. We've made a real foothold in the academic research along the way, because that's where we got our start. We acquired LTI, Liberating Technologies, in 2021, and things are looking up.
Very good. Wow. It's very good. Well, Blair and Shawn, for the listeners who might be unfamiliar with, could you just give them a brief look at what is pattern recognition, and go ahead and throw in the TMR?
Sure. Well, I'll separate those because it's important to that, and I'll touch on that. Once in a while, we'll encounter clinics or folks who are not fully versed in this, who may think or understand that TMR, targeted muscle reinnervation, and pattern recognition, namely myoelectric pattern recognition, are the same thing. And really, they're not. They're two incredibly complementary, they work well together technologies. TMR is a surgical technique that was first really rolled out to give upper limb amputees a way to provide their control information out to the prosthetic device. And what that is nerves, literal nerves inside the arms, chest, shoulder areas, were sewed into, for lack of better definition of that, into available musculature. And what happens is these nerves that they use were ones that would have talked to now missing parts of the limb, hands, wrists, elbows, for example. So what happens here is the nerves carry information from the brain that is trying to control or move those missing parts, the hand or the wrist. Now those nerves, as they're connected to new muscle bodies, those muscles act as amplifiers. So if you think of nerves as like wires, when we used to wire up our speakers, and the speakers, like the amplifiers that the muscles are, the muscles became a way that the neurological information coming from the nerves would be sort of sent out to the world. And so TMR gained popularity quite rapidly, and it was really something, it was found a little bit later into the rollout of TMR that it was really also quite good for helping manage phantom limb pain and other things. So TMR is widespread. It's a surgical technique. Myoelectric pattern recognition is an application. It's an algorithmic technique that uses information from the body to control a prosthetic device. And I really should point out here that the phrase pattern recognition is really all around us. It's not just a term used in O&P. Sometimes I think we like to think it is, but it's not. There are engineering, data, science, textbooks. You can take degrees on this topic. It's also known in those spaces as pattern classification. And generally what it is really is it's an algorithmic and numerical ways to recognize a known result from a large input set of data. So if you think that, how we use that in O&P. So to date, what we do is we use it in advancing the myoelectric control of these upper limb prosthetic arms and hands, these technologies that are on the market. In our case, the big set of data is the combined sources of a lot of muscle information, so myoelectric or EMG information, and the outputs from this pattern classifier are the movements of the prosthetic device. I'd say one of the biggest differences to quote unquote experts in pattern recognition in the rest of the world in O&P, one big thing is that we here in O&P use it in a real-time sense, meaning we're not taking a huge set of data, processing the data, and then at some point, minutes or hours or whenever later, coming up with the result. The result has to happen immediately because it's being worn by somebody. And as they are trying to move a prosthetic device, it needs to happen in real time. So that's a big challenge in the world of pattern recognition, and one thing that's important to our technology.
Very good, very good. Well, just I want to throw in one follow-up question to that. For those maybe who are new into the O&P industry or just haven't done a lot of upper extremities, explain the difference of the EMG myo electrodes we've seen for 30 plus years compared to a pattern recognition input.
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that. That feels like the story we get to tell every day. I've been telling that story for almost 20 years now. So what you're referring to, Sam, has a few different names in our field. Dual site control, two site control. We often hear it called direct control. And I personally think direct control is a misnomer, where pattern recognition is probably, in fact, more direct because of its intuitiveness. You do a direct muscle pattern and get that exact motion. But this dual site control, two electrodes or two sensors that have been commercially available since around the 1970s, and it's a standard of care. We sometimes call that traditional or conventional control, right? These sensors that detect muscle signals, and often what we consider myoelectric control in the field. To describe the difference here, well, let's look at what those two sensors, those two myoelectric electrodes from a dual site conventional direct system are really doing. Those two sensors are recording, or they're detecting how loud a muscle contraction is, how strong it is. So the stronger you squeeze the muscle, the louder the electrical signal that's coming from it. And if you take two of them, and I'll have listeners think about their forearm for a moment, and if you were to grab your forearm and kind of put one hand around your other forearm, where the muscles are in your other forearm, and you flex your wrist back and forth, you can feel two areas of muscle contracting. And if you put two sensors, one over each area of those muscles, and detect the loudness, how loud is muscle area A compared to muscle area B, and vice versa, how loud is muscle area B compared to muscle area A. So you have two noise, loudness sources kind of yelling at each other. And what happens is you get two inputs, two switches, and they're kind of like sliding a switch back and forth. So in the example of a prosthetic hand that maybe is powered to open and close, you have these two sensors, and when A is louder than B, we might tell the hand to open. And when B is louder than A, we might have that hand close. Well, now push that forward and say if there is a powered wrist rotation unit, it has to pronate and supinate. Well, I only have two input switches, but I have four motions to control. So over the years, the field has come up with codes and trickery and switches and triggers, we often call them, to switch into that. So you can do co-contraction. So you make both A and B go really quickly, or you flick A and you flick B, sort of Morse code-like. So you kind of trigger the system into cycling through the functions. Fast forward even more with the advent of the multifunction hands that are quite remarkable. We have more things to control with the same two really basic switches. So we lay that out. Pattern recognition, in contrast, differs in three fundamental spaces, three fundamental aspects of that. Number one, you have more sensors, right? So instead of the two that are recording two areas of muscle, there's a lot of muscle in the arms. We use an array, and we'll get to that in a moment. Now, each sensor itself is different. So instead of detecting just the loudness of those muscle areas, we're detecting what the information is. So if you think of those muscle areas as, we often use the analogy of like an orchestra or a band or musical group, and we don't listen as humans, we don't listen to musical groups just to hear how loud they are, or how loud one section of the orchestra is compared to how loud the other section of the orchestra is. We want to hear the content, the music, the fidelity. So with pattern recognition, you have an array of sensors that are not just recording the loudness, they're recording the fidelity. These muscle contraction, the electricity, myoelectric activity, myoelectricity, has fidelity, it has information that we, as a field, largely ignore when we use these two-site systems. So we use it very differently. This very rich set of data from an array of sensors that are recording the fidelity, not just the loudness, is what is that large data set when we talk all the way back on pattern recognition. We take that large data set, and in real time, we use these machine learning algorithms, which there's the buzzword of du jour, right? That machine learning is everywhere. That's really at the core of this. The machine learning algorithms can decode that information in real time and provide the control to the device. So the result is an incredible functional difference. So for somebody wearing a hand, whether or not it's a device that opens and closes or has more actuators to do multifunction grasps and maybe a wrist rotator and maybe a powered elbow, whatever their configuration may be, the wearer gets to use their natural control. So to turn a wrist, they turn a wrist. Their residual impression of what their wrist is. The same with a grasping pattern. If they want to pinch or make a power grasp or a lateral pinch or a point or a trigger pull, these types of things are coded into the available musculature. A system like pattern recognition detects that and commands it to those devices. So it gets trained the way these algorithms work. They get calibrated and trained. The user teaches it their natural control. You get all these functions. It's adaptable. The biggest thing we know and that we, again, teach and really help educate around is it opens the door for our wearers of these devices to personalize, and that's a key term, personalize their myoelectric control. With our conventional dual site, we had to kind of put them in a box. When they're in our clinics, we put the two electrodes on, we fight to find two, what we call isolated spots, two hot spots, and we build that into the prosthesis, and we say, great, we dial in. There used to be gains and thresholds and settings, and we had that set, and that was it. Don't touch the dials. That's where it had to be. Great, good luck, you're out the door. Hope for the best. Pattern recognition, because of the machine learning, changes. Bodies change. The choice of how I want to use something changes. The way I put the prosthesis on today versus yesterday changes. And that's where the personalization of control is a big deal. So you don't just get an intuitive level of natural control because of the algorithms. You get the ability for it to adapt, to learn with you, and you to choose how you want to do it at any time.
And I'll add some color to that too. The technological lift is immense. The stuff that happens under the hood, I could listen to Blair and the people who developed this technology talk about it, and it really is a long time in the making. I mean, this is decades. COAPT's been around for a decade, but even before that, the development of this technology, was a long time in the making. And I'll give you, today I was sitting talking to a COAPT user, and she had a multifunction hand and wrist rotator, and we were talking about non-prosthetic stuff, and she's gesticulating, and as she's doing that, she's opening her hand and she's kind of, turning her wrist up in a way, just the natural way that we would all do it, right? And to people that use a prosthetic, that's really what it's about. That's what we want to do. We want to give you a real personalized relationship with your prosthesis that is just totally natural. And we say it all the time that we're okay not being the star of the show. If you're using your prosthesis and you're not thinking about COAPT at all, that's exactly what we want. We want it to be that as close to embodiment of your prosthesis as we possibly can.
Wow, it's a pretty amazing technology, and there's so many questions we can go down. But what I guess the question I had, Blair, when you were explaining this, would the patterns that Shawn as a user would use to define his movements differ from what you as a user, Blair? And I guess that would be different on, amputation levels where, the actual amputation was made. But I in my mind, I kind of think the original kind of dual site was like, okay, we're going to tell you the answer and you're going to find it. Whereas here, we're going to kind of maybe lay a blanket over your entire limb. And again, that's another great question. What is the interface like? Is it just two sites, or is it like almost like a blanket over the whole limb? And then you're just reading all these movements. So there was two deep questions in there. If you guys want to take it, you mentioned personalization. How does a user don it? What is the interface, and is it personal?
Yeah, I'll maybe add a little bit of that going backwards, and Shawn, you fill in the blanks where I've gone wrong here. So in order to make this a usable technology, we've developed and implemented it as an add-on agnostic kit, meaning we made myoelectric pattern recognition into a literal electronics black box, and it can be added today to any ARM build. On one end of that unit, we have special connectors, basically that interface pretty simply with an array of EMG sensors. These are just dome electrodes that, to your point, kind of cover or blanket the residual limb. Our guidance provides detailed education on that, on how to just to very quickly determine, hey, where is there underlying muscle and where there's not. And wherever there's underlying muscle, make sure that these electrode domes are spread about to record that information. The more the merrier. We like to say, if we carry that orchestra analogy and you're going to record all of the fidelity from them, put microphones all over the whole spot, not just in two places. And so not the hot spots. On the other end of our black box, we have developed and worked pretty diligently now we have the ability to connect to and speak the language of those elbows, wrists, hand, and all the combinations that are in our field today. We don't, for the listeners, COAPT doesn't make prosthetic hands or wrists or elbows, and that's a very interesting sort of tangent. It sometimes is difficult to show in still images or videos of what COAPT actually is and does. The hands and the devices and the function and our users being happy is really great to show, but we're sort of under the hood, and we're that black box tucked away inside there, and that's great. We don't need to. Once it's working the way it is, we know what's going on there. There are something like 400 or more different combinations of wrists, elbow, hands on the market if you add them all up. So they build this in. It's pretty easy. We've developed a lot of good clinical support, technical support on how to do that. When the user wears it, they get to teach it. So to the first part of that question, every individual, any one of us, any one of our users, anybody that tries this out has their own myoelectric fingerprint, let's call it. It's kind of like a digital signature. And not only every person, every level, every sort of amputation type, it can change day to day, or it can change slightly. We all know that prostheses can fit differently day to day, and sometimes the way we think about using them changes day to day in subtle ways. The algorithms have been tuned and developed and continue to be refined over the years to accommodate for that, and that's where that personalization comes in. So right, we're not just saying, putting the users in the box of capability, here's what you're stuck with. The sort of world is wide open. The more they get to use it, the more robust and adaptive it becomes with their muscle signatures. It improves along with them.
So I've got a question that's about challenges. I haven't done COAPT before, right? When can I do COAPT and when can I not do COAPT?
Yeah, you can ask that, a couple different ways of like, what are some of the challenges you can expect with this? Because it's a little bit different than, what we're used to. I think the first most important thing you can do when you're looking about when do I use COAPT, when do I not, is you first have to make the decision about what type of upper limb prosthesis is going to be right for your patient. So I'll talk about the COAPT specific stuff, but you need to talk to your patients and you need to understand what their activities of daily living look like. Whether it's just normal stuff around the house or whether it's vocation specific tasks, that's going to kind of define the scope for you of what you're trying to deliver to your patient in terms of benefits. With any new technology, COAPT included, it's good advice to take some time to map out the process and understand the benefits and how they relate to your patient's goals so that you can articulate why you're choosing the components that you are. And you can also then set good, reasonable expectations for your patient too about the prosthetic. So, what can they reasonably do with it, and help them understand that delivery of the prosthesis that's not the finish line. You're still in it, then you need to take some time to learn how to use it really well so that it's not a moment of disappointment when something goes wrong, they need an adjustment or they need to come back to see you. So with that as the, kind of set the stage, I'll say what are some COAPT specific stuff that you need to be aware of if you've determined your patient is a right candidate for a myoelectric prosthesis, and now you're looking at, is COAPT going to be right for them? I think first, reimbursement's part of the conversation here. Today, COAPT uses an unlisted code, L7499 or L9900. So you need to go into it understanding when you are going to build a prosthesis, the more stuff you add to it, you're making compromises in aesthetics. And that's, I think, something that comes up or that we get asked a lot about is like, I don't want to make my patient a football arm, so to speak. That's fair. There are techniques you can use to reduce that down and get something that's a little bit more aesthetic, but it is a compromise. And so if you set that expectation with your patient up front, then again, it's less shocking when you end up with the finished product and it is what it is. And I think another thing that's a consideration is like tech tolerance for your patient. We get asked about that all the time and something that comes up. We built a lot of features into this to make this extremely user-friendly. It really behaves kind of like the consumer electronics that we're all used to. It has, helping tools in there to help you make sense of what you can be doing better to get better control of your prosthesis. And we have features that are meant to make this as simple as follow our Simon Says routine to personalize your prosthesis via calibration, and you can use it. And that can be as simple as it is without the need for an app or anything else. So we always say that great technology is really simple to use, and that's what we aim for when it comes to the product.
Well, I can tell you have been around upper extremity prosthetics for a little while. Because you just quoted in less than 5 minutes my whole 2-hour upper extremity review course.
It's been a decade in the making for me. It's hard to say out loud. I'll say so. We talked about who is it not for, and what are the hard parts of it. I'll add to that then who is a good candidate. Blair mentioned it already, but I'll tell you the specifics who's a candidate. But more is being done for patients than ever before. It's really cool to see the proliferation of TMR, targeted muscle reinnervation, because patients are showing up with less limb pain, with, we hope, less phantom pain. And also, frankly, they're hot wired in many cases, when it's an upper limb amputee, to be an excellent myoelectric prosthetic user, especially COAPT in pattern recognition. So I'll say it's good to have relationships with, interdisciplinary relationships with referring physicians, surgeons, occupational therapists, psychologists where it makes sense. Really, anyone who's a candidate for myoelectric prosthesis can use COAPT and can benefit from COAPT. But I'll just highlight quickly 3 situations where the benefits of the technology can actually expand who can be considered for a myoelectric prosthesis. I think traditionally we would look at someone who's going to use multiple degrees of freedom, say powered elbow, powered wrist, powered hand, or even just all the features of a multifunction hand. And if that person has challenges with the triggering or the mode switching needed to get all the function out of that device, well, that's a challenge, and that's something that makes it hard to demonstrate that this person's going to benefit from all that their prosthesis is capable of. With COAPT in that personalized, seamless control that we talk about, people can access a lot more of the great functions of those components that are really more capable of ever than for everyday use. I'll highlight one other situation. People with weak or unbalanced myosignals. Blair mentioned it. COAPT, we don't care about strong signals or signal separation. We just want those distinct, repeatable patterns. And so, especially like someone who opted out of a myoelectric prosthesis a long time ago and now are having to revisit it due to overuse or compensatory movements, challenges with their body, this can be an intriguing option for those people. So,
Oh, awesome. You guys seem very, very excited about this. I know that the O&P community is extremely excited about it. And very often, awesome ideas lead to more awesome ideas. So, what does the future hold for COAPT, if you don't mind sharing, if it's not a secret, I guess?
No, we always like to talk about the parts of the future we can. I think if we weren't um, people who liked developing an evolution of technology, we wouldn't have been doing what we've done for all this time. So it comes very natural to us. And I think that's actually an interesting point in our field. In O&P, if you look historically, a lot of advancements come in an evolutionary way. So I won't say slow, but changes that happen to known or existing concepts over time as they improve and as research and outcomes show the improvements are of benefit. It hasn't happened very often in our field where there's been a big sidestep where a novel, or I hate to say disruptive type of technology comes in. There are definitely lots of examples. And I would say that 10, 12 years ago, we embarked on that journey. And part of what we do every day, to Shawn's earlier points here, when we're out spreading the word and having people experience this, it's really trying to help educate and break the mold of what the norm in the day-to-day is. So we certainly understand and respect what people's profession has been built on, where their schooling curriculum has laid out for them. And for us, we take a multifaceted approach on getting new information, kind of having people break through. And while we've talked about this as technology, what we're showing is function. And when we give people the opportunity to see and experience this function through this technology for themselves, they really understand. It's really just sort of getting your foot in the door because everybody's busy. We know what we know. We do what we do. We try all we can and have all the tools top to bottom to help expose people to that. But the future is again, always fun to chat about. And I don't have to go too far to say to everybody here, the world of data, right? Big data has truly started to enter O&P. We've been living and preaching this, frankly, for years. Data is coming, and now we see it coming into our space from all angles. There's lots of great efforts, things like the massive O&P limb registry initiatives. There's all kinds of data play, and it becomes a word that is both sort of anxiety-inducing and welcomed at the same time. And there's some misunderstanding, and nobody quite knows what this means, perhaps, or they have their own version of what data is. At COAPT and through our acquisition of LTI, we kind of work to branch out further into O&P with what we do best, right? So new product ideas, new applications that they're coming around the corner. All of these have a single tying bind. And where we operate well is in a blend of what we call biopotential data. So myoelectric, so information that the body is producing that can turn into data. Environmental data, so that's sensors. How is a device moving around in the world? And usage data. So what is somebody who's wearing a device or anything in a rehabilitation tech doing with all the above? And when you blend these data sources together, it's truly poised to change the way our field's clinicians will and should treat and retreat their patients. So more informed visits, data acquisition and dissemination systems to both our product users and our clinics, our therapists, everybody involved, are about to change in really exciting ways. So what we're working on are the backbone parts of that. So the pieces of electronics that record these informations from the body, which are not easy to do. They're also not easy to package up and make in a robust enough way that they live and travel along inside these prosthetic devices. More backbone parts that, how does that data travel around from wherever that user is in their daily life to wherever the clinician is, and how is the information, there's so much data, how is it processed in an effective way? We can't just dump all data out and expect everybody to become data science experts overnight. So the processing, the analysis that has to happen to make these technologies not scary, but user-friendly and more importantly beneficial. AI creeps in, so artificial intelligence, and that we're at a moment with AI where no one can quite tell if it's scary or not. Everyone has their own opinions on that. But I do think and see that there are applications in this new data world in O&P where we, COAPT, can lean in heavily on our expertise in information from the body, our machine learning techniques, and our appreciation and understanding of how clinical delivery can benefit.
And before we go, is there anything that we didn't ask that you would like to get out there into the ears of our listeners?
I think a couple of quick things. We should give a shout out. We talked about TMR as a surgical technique that is really cool, and we see patients in clinics with that. There are other great things that have happened in our field and continue to happen. Osseointegration has moved into upper extremity. There are other surgical techniques that are similar in some senses to TMR. Some may or may not have heard of these yet. There's the AMI or AMI procedure. There's RPNI. There's a few other things out there. And it's really cool as we see these things come online because we planned and developed COAPT to be agnostic, not just to the prosthetic devices that folks can buy and fit, but also these other, we'll call them surgical techniques and advancements in the field. So if somebody has an upper limb osseointegration implant, or if they've had one other of the surgical enhancements like RPNI or AMI, these can be great candidates for COAPT. We're seeing more and more of that all the time. So really diving into that complementary nature that we love to do. Really quickly, we as a company and as a group of people, we are really collaborative. We wouldn't have been able to grow a successful company from a bedroom, second bedroom to what we are today if we weren't open-minded and collaborative. There's a lot of really good people in the field, and we certainly knew going in that this wasn't something we're going to be able to build and do from our own island. It's been a key to our success, and we certainly encourage people if they've got other novel technologies, ways they want to work with us, from product development through academic research grants. We do that. It keeps us busy and it keeps us engaged and excited. I encourage, this is lastly here, I encourage clinics and clinicians, frankly, to be open-minded, not just with COAPT, but I think as the future of our field grows and expands and changes. Embrace not just the promise of the future, right? We always keep talking about the future. Well, the future, we'll be able to see limbs that do X, Y, Z in the future. But reality is a lot of that future is today. A lot of the advanced technology that we think about as the futuristic is readily available. And clinicians are doing a better job all the time of embracing that. And we're very excited about it.
I'm kind of biting my tongue here because there's so much cool stuff that we're working on. So I think if you're out there, you're a listener, you're listening to this and you're interested, you think the conversation's interested, maybe you have an idea you want to share with us, come take a second. If you're driving, pull over to the side of the road very safely. Come follow us on social media, go to our website, sign up for our newsletter. Let's keep in touch. There's a lot more cool coming with COAPT, so let's stay in touch.
Very cool. Well, that leads right into our normal segue of, if you'd like to connect with Blair or Shawn on LinkedIn or learn more about COAPT's complete control systems, all of the links are there in our show notes. So thank you guys so much. We really appreciate you guys. You're doing awesome work.
Look forward to seeing y'all soon.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks for having us. It was a pleasure.
Thank you for tuning in to the O&P Check-In, an SPS podcast.
If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to the show on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, or wherever you listen to episodes.
And while you're at it, rate and review the podcast to help fellow O&P professionals find us.
Email us your topic suggestions and feedback at spspodcast@spsco.com.
See you next time.